9 o'clock. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Person Board of County Commissioners to order at this time. And the purpose for this special meeting is to have a work session related to the possible adoption of a UDO ordinance or a UDO. And so at this time, we are officially in session. And Manager Kathy, are you leading today?
Well, I can get us started. I am aware that the board would like to have this work session today to delve in a bit deeper into the UDO. I think there are some specific sections that you want to pay particular attention to today. Our county attorney, T.C. Morphus, is here. He can provide some guidance, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that arise that I will be able to answer, and if not, I will take some notes and we can come back together to discuss. As far as the process moving forward, the UDO, the draft UDO that you now have before you for consideration, did go through a process of development through a steering committee with our consultants, Benchmark. That was a public process, and then it has also gone through many meetings over the course of the year with the planning board. They met twice a month to consider the UDO in great detail. There was also much public participation encouraged in that process. The meetings were noticed through the newspaper, and those meetings did have a public in attendance who commented and provided their input to the planning board. And then on October 7th, the planning board did have a public hearing officially but prior to recommending the UDO to the commissioners for your approval. And then on October 7th, you all held a public hearing, so there was an opportunity for public comment. And at that time, you made the decision to table consideration of whether to approve or deny the UDO to a later date. Specifically until after a planning director was hired. In the meantime, you've had some time to give this some more thought, have some more conversations around it, and now have asked for this special meeting to consider it today. So if you make some slight adjustments to the draft language, you may be able to go ahead and approve it today, given the process that this has been through. But as we said earlier, our attorney may provide some guidance as far as the threshold to need to take it back to the planning board and through the public hearing process again.
And if I could, just on that point, what our case law says is that if you make a substantial change to an ordinance that's already gone through the planning board and public hearing process, it needs to go back to the planning board. This is a really big document. I know my sense was that there was a lot of the document that board members had no issue with and felt could be adopted, but there were specific ordinances and specific issues that you wanted to address further. And so what I would say is, after you've had your meeting today, when you're thinking about next steps, if you feel like there are specific things that need to be worked on, but the whole of the ordinance, sort of administrative mechanisms and things like that are okay, what you may choose to do is pull those out for additional work and adopt the ordinance. I think that would be permissible. I think if you think other larger changes need to happen, then we'll go through that process as well. But I'm happy to talk further on that as we get later in the meeting.
And I'd also like to offer something else for consideration. As you know, we do have a vacancy in our planning director position now, and we do have a new planner within the department who has been in the process of familiarizing herself with our current planning ordinance. So both our planning technician and planner are currently working from our current ordinance documents. One thing that you could consider in adopting the UDO, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is making an effective date in the future so that our current staff who do have time limitations right now in terms of handling the day-to-day have adequate time to prepare themselves to administer this new document in terms of making sure all the forms are updated, that they are very much familiar with all of the provisions and ready to implement it at that time. So that will take some time for them to prepare for that. So rather than adopting it today with an effective date of today, or putting it, you could decide to, move the approval to your meeting on Monday, add that to the agenda. But you may want to set that effective date out, 30 or 60 days, beginning of the new year, something along those lines, to allow adequate time for staff to be prepared to administer it.
Okay, any particular order that we want to address issues here? We've got some people in the audience that would like to speak. And I suppose those are specific concerns. And so, any particular order, anybody?
I'd like to hear the audience speak, get them, their opinion, and
Which is
That sounds
fine.
like
Fine,
a typical way we would
Mhm.
move ahead with
Okay.
this.
Okay, Madam Clerk, you have the first speaker.
Yes, sir. So our first speaker would be Joe Berryhill.
Okay.
Good morning,
Good
Mr.
morning,
Chairman and
sir.
board members.
one,
I thank y'all for allowing us to have some input on this. My main concern is two ordinances. One was that 500 feet from your property line, that, in our mind, that's, 500 feet is a long ways. That's on page 4-19, line number 3. And that one and the one that we have to move them out in 180 days. That one seemed to hurt more than any of them. And for what reason that is, I don't know, but we would ask you to waive that one, or those two, anyway.
Sir, I don't, I don't mean to interrupt and you're doing a great job. Those are your major concerns, but, the 500-foot issue was actually brought down to 75, wasn't it? By Boley, and, there was an error. Did I not hear that? Read that?
no, I hadn't seen that.
I haven't seen that either.
The way it currently reads is a minimum separation distance of 500 feet
Mhm.
measured in a straight line
Mhm.
between the nearest property lines of each campground/RV site. So that is something that's supposed to be included on the site plan.
Mhm.
I am not sure where that particular provision originated, or what, the particular reasons are behind
Okay,
that
all right.
provision.
Well, I don't think I dreamed that up. And I recall Boley saying that it was an error. That it should have been there and it was overlooked. But, okay, we'll go ahead.
But there's also another line in there, I can find it in a little bit, that it talks about 50 feet from the property line. I think that's acceptable.
Which,
Would you say that's what you have, Mr. Berryhill?
Yeah, we were held to that when we built ours, yeah.
okay. Yeah, I'm fine. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Please,
No,
please,
that's,
go right ahead.
and, I like to say, at one point they talk about the 50 feet, and then on another one they talk about up to 500 feet, and I'm lost on that, so. we have a copy of our site plan if that would help.
No, I'm fine.
Right. Thank y'all.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
We have Gary Garrett as our next speaker.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
I just kind of reiterate on some stuff Joe said. I think the 180-day rule would make RVs go to parks outside Person County so they wouldn't have to move. And with the current processes in place, it's already a difficult process to build a park. With more stringent processes in place, I think it would be, in the future, people will put parks in non-permitted and just try to avoid the rules. And there's a need for these places in Person County for people to vacate, hunt, work, fish, attend sporting events. And I think your ordinance that's in place now is sufficient for what we need here. So,
Any questions of Mr. Garrett?
Talking about the current ordinance that we
Yes.
currently have.
yes.
Mr. Garrett, I apologize. May I ask you a question, sir?
Yes, sir.
You currently have your application. Have you submitted your application for the expanded park that you all are working on?
Yes, I hadn't, I got the application in, I have not received a permit yet.
Okay, well, and the reason I ask is just so you and Mr. Berryhill know, in North Carolina, once you've submitted that application for the permit, you're entitled to the rules as of the day that they're written. So even if the board adopted a more stringent policy, for future projects, it wouldn't change what you all are required to do for this project.
I'm thinking the 180-day rule would apply to us.
That may well, sir, because it's an
Yes.
ongoing project.
Yes.
And just to add to what you had just said, we do have the written order on the agenda for approval, Monday
Okay.
night for the special use permit that was approved at the last meeting. So after
Okay.
that, we can move forward with
Okay.
permitting.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker we have is Cal Berryhill.
Good morning, and
Morning.
we thank you for this opportunity. I'm Joe's brother. He's the, really the diplomat of the two, so I'm a farmer, and I feel like I'm out of my field. Talking about something that was already been talked about, I agree with the 50-foot buffer. That's what we have, and it works good. On page 419, item number 5, it talks about the sizes of the sites, the way I understand it. That 2,500 square feet inset, what is that? Is that the actual site of the pad or the lot, or what is that?
What page, Mr. Berryhill?
Page 19, 419, item number 5. It says a 25-foot by 100-foot, and the inset of a maximum density of no greater than 2,500 square feet. Is that the size of the actual lot, or is that the size of the pad where the camper sits? Just what is that?
In our current ordinance, the wording is density to be 2,500 square feet for each tent or trailer space. That's in our current ordinance, and that's how I read this. But
Yeah, I'm just trying to pull up the ordinance.
to just explain it in more detail.
So does that include, that's the whole lot then? You got a 25 by 100 foot. That's the size of the lot, right?
The space for the RV, the site.
So
Right.
what is the size of the site then? Okay, in our ordinance, and of course, ours was drawn up by Summit out of South Boston. It was architect and engineered. Each one of our sites is a 40
Okay.
by 70 area. That includes a parking lot. And it's all set at 40 degrees So this makes it easier for the camper to back right in instead of backing off 90 degrees off the road. But our actual site for that whole camper is 40 by 70. That includes its parking. And that is, I think that's a minimum. If it was 70 by 50 would be great.
Right, so the way I read this is the dimension of 25 by 100, which is, you know, just a different shape than what you're describing. And it includes the parking space.
Right. Well, I think
Is
it'd
the
be
way
more,
this is worded.
right, I think it'd be more appropriate if it was wider and
Uh-huh.
shorter. Give you more yard space.
So the restriction there, if you're saying the minimum dimension
Yeah.
of 25 times 100 makes the 100-foot longer than what you have in place, is
Right.
what you're saying.
So, it says, going down to, 7B, they're talking about paving the roads. So, what, at the campsite, so what determines the number that makes it a campsite? Is it more than one? Does 2 campers make it a campsite? And they'd have to have the road paved and entrance and all that? And, go ahead.
Which number was that? Let's see.
Hey, could you say again where that
B.
was?
It was,
You say, Miss,
it was right down below, it's on, 7B on page 19.
Okay.
That's, to me, if it's, I mean, a campsite's got two campers in it, that's sort of extreme. In our case, yeah, I mean, we were permitted, we got a concrete driveway in, and then the sub-roads in there are gravel, and that was permitted at the time that we got permitted. And, you know, our size, you got traffic, it creates dust, which is not good, but we are permitted to do that. But if for somebody that's got 2 or 3 campers, you know, you're not gonna have that much traffic. Does it need to be asphalted or concrete? That's the question I asked. Something, you know, that could be worked out. And the way we look at our lot, there are 2 type of campers. They're the campers that are passerbyers, you know, may spend a week to go to the race or some event here in Roxborough, and they be gone. We got some of them in there that staying 2 or 3 months while they build their house. We got traveling nurses that stay for a while, but the majority of our campers are workers. They, you know, we got so much going on with Duke, ash cleanup, all the time they're renovating, doing something with the plants, and they gonna probably tear them down and put some other type plant there. Got the gas facility storage thing. We got workers staying at our campsite for that. And then we got the mega site work coming up. So majority of our campers are workers. They're there from 2 or 3 months to years. Our first camper that came in was working for Duke for the ash cleanup. He was saying 7 years. Now he's saying it may be longer. And it'd be like Mr. Garrett said, it'd be an inconvenience for them to have to pull out in 180 days. It's not, you know, we're just not being friendly. But, you know, around the lakes where they want a turnover, I can understand that, you know, 180 days. I'm thinking around the lakes, they don't even have sewer. They got to either have it pumped or take their RV somewhere to pump it. But in our situation, you know, I mean, we don't want permanent residents either. But I think that 180 days needs to be taken out.
Mr. Berryhill, do you have y'all have your own septic system?
No. We out in the country and we looked up and found this site that had 2 city manholes in it. So, and water run right up the road. So we lucked out. Of course, we had to go in and put in the manholes within our site, and we even had to put in a water hydrant. Of course, once we put all that in, it becomes the city's. So we lucked out, and that's That's been a big plus for us. And there was another item in there, I forgot where it is, they talked about lighting. We've had several campers say, don't put up lights. This is a camper, they like it dark. But most of the campers have some type external light, and the place is not completely dark. We got 2 cupolas on the office building and the bathhouse that stay lit all night, so that provides some light too, but it's not completely dark. Of course, we got motion lights on both buildings there, so people walk by, it lights up. And we have security cameras too. Of course, at our public hearing, it was talked about a gated entrance, but it was never enforced, but we don't have a gated entrance. And they talked about putting buffer trees and shrubs around the place. Well, we have, but you planted this big, still, it's not good. It doesn't do you any good until 10, 15 years when they get up and block all the view. But anyway,
So is that item number 14 on page 420, a photometric plan using LED lighting?
yeah.
With
mhm.
directional downward light
Yeah,
fixtures?
mhm. And we have considered solar panel lights. They just don't give off a whole lot of light, just enough, but our campers don't complain about not, having street lights, so. And, they have, down on number 15 on that same page, they talk about some of the pets things and some of the rules and regulations for the park. Well, I think that one more needs to be added, and we got it in ours, no habitual dog barking. But, that could be specific to each park, their own set of rules for the grounds, so that's just the way we do. But I think the main thing is we make the lots a little bit fatter, a little bit shorter would give you more elbow room. It's one of the main things that we talked about, and then that 50-foot buffer would be more appropriate.
If you rearrange that configuration, would that limit the number of trailers you would have in the park?
To which way? To the way the ordinance is now?
No.
The way we have it now?
Switch that around where you greater footage.
No, that's the way ours is now.
Yeah, okay, all right.
But ours was designed for 40 feet wide on the perpendicular.
Okay.
But, 40 to 50 feet wide would be a gracious plenty, I would think.
Mr. Baker, you said 40, y'all are 40 by 70. Is that what
Right,
you said?
and that includes the parking. It'd be enough space there for 2 vehicles. So, you'll have roughly 50 feet for the camper, and we very seldom have a camper over 40 feet. So it's a plenty of room there for parking. And our plan call for a 40-foot road within the park and a 24-foot road coming into the park. So, and yeah, for future parks our size, asphalt or paved road will be a plus, be an advantage. So, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker we have is Claudia Berryhill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners.
Good morning.
I was appointed to the Tourism Development Authority Board in 2017 by your board, and some of you are currently still serving, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve my county, and also thank you guys for your service. And I have been chair of the TDA board for the last 4 years. And I am concerned with the passing of the short-term rental part of the UDO. And I have attended several of the planning board meetings and spoken with several members. And while I applaud the effort and time the members spent, I am concerned that their decisions and discussions of the short-term rentals were made in a vacuum. The TDA board and director were not consulted, neither were the realtors, neither were the Airbnb operators or the VRBO operators and other third-party platform operators. In other words, all of the stakeholders in the STR world. This is a perfect example of stakeholders not being informed or consulted in their world of RV parks. I think the whole process of all of the parts of the UDO that are recommended to be changed or modified, in my opinion, they did the best they could, but the decisions and the discussions were in a vacuum. The people who live it, work it, breathe it, were not involved. And it was only, I'm gonna say by coincidence, that TDA realized that the discussions with the STRs were going on. So I feel like that was, not having the stakeholders involved in such an important thing is a problem. The short-term rentals represent approximately 35 to 38% of TDA income, and that's our only source of funds is through the collection of these occupancy taxes. And our director presented her economic impact study to you only a short time ago. And after administrative fees, the balance of these funds go back into the county through grants and other projects that the TDA undertakes. For an example, we are way into the process of doing countywide wayfinding signage. It's a huge project that will bring a lot of uplift to the county to be able to see directional signs throughout our county to all of our assets that tourism can use. So the impact of substantial loss of the collection of these funds is yet to be determined. And I feel like more study and input from all stakeholders affected by this UDO will yield fair and enforceable rules. It also appears that you may be placing a new planning director at a disadvantage to enforce or continually amend these ordinances. I thank you for your time and allow us to speak to you all today.
Thank you.
Thank
Do
you.
you have any questions of me?
Claudia, so regarding the short-term rentals, the entire section G, I don't know if you have a copy of the UDO, but it specifically deals with the short-term rental units. That whole section is questionable, in your opinion?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I think it just, there needs to be more conversation. You talked about these Airbnbs. TDA does not know who they are. So to ask to enforce by permitting a site, a short-term rental, we don't know exactly who they are. And I think you could be creating a world, an underground world of where rentals would go out, either contract rentals or vacation rentals, under the table, so to speak, but because it's not advertised, and then we're not collecting the money. There just needs to be more thought and knowledge of what you're going to be placing on short-term rentals.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is Jay Poindexter.
Good morning, how y'all?
Morning.
Got a phone call last night from Corey Davis. He was talking about, he didn't know nothing about this meeting, he hadn't read and all that, but he's a contractor. And you sitting here thinking, what could be in here, but I hadn't read through it either for the subdivisions and all till last night. I got to looking at some of these. And I saw where y'all got the minor one sitting at 5 acres, 5 houses or less, and then you got the major sitting at 5 or more. But did y'all address the one where if I put a road in, put a subdivision in and make it 10.01 acres, do I have to pay the road if I go over the 5 houses? And I hadn't read the 302 pages of the whole thing yet. Of course, probably nobody has yet, but anyway. That was one problem going through, talking to Corey last night. And also he said something about when they're building a house and they got new construction, he asked me to speak on this and I'll get to my point. But, like if they building a house and they gotta have power turned on in that house just for a little while when they're sanding the walls, painting or whatever, you gotta have some heat on that to get out that mud. Well, you get that power cut on, well now it says in the ordinance that, well, this is what he said, it said in the ordinance, I hadn't read it, but they gotta give, like, for the landscaping and all that, they gotta give 125% to planning and zoning to hold until that is finished. The project is finished, landscaping and all is finished, 125%. And you talking about a contractor building a house, and you probably know, Charlie, and all, That's a lot of money. A man got to pull out his pocket when he's trying to finish a job too on the top of it. So, I mean, it's just stuff like that they was talking about. Just thought y'all might want to address that. But also, again, with what everyone else has said, you got a new director coming in. I would hate for y'all to have a pile of coal and hot fire for him to walk into. I think he needs to read over this, be part of this discussion on this, because I believe you setting him up for failure right off the get. He should be involved in it. It's just like Claudia was talking about these short-term rentals going underground. They already underground. There's people out there now, they don't do Airbnb because they don't want to pay their fees. But if you look close enough on that Facebook, they renting them houses, but they're not going through Airbnb, and it's cutting y'all out already. So, I mean, it's a lot of things, and I did go to planning and zoning meetings on the Airbnbs, and I didn't realize how many we had in this county until they told me that, and I was like, man, then I went back and started searching myself. I mean, 200 and some Airbnbs in this town, it's a lot. So, my concern, one of my concerns was, talking about they was doing a short term with the trailer parks, with the campers. I have trailer parks, and when you're talking about that setback rule on that, I evict people. I don't own none of the houses. When I evict them, they take that house with them, hopefully. But anyway, if we take that house out, do I have to do the setback rules to set another one down based on the rules now, or am I grandfathered in from the old rule? Because
Right. I don't know.
500 feet, mine's like 50. From my neighbors, but we've been established and running, and so I just wondered about that part, and I hadn't read it in this part as well, but I didn't make it to the meeting in planning and zoning when it was going over the campus stuff. Not campers, but trailers, mobile home parks. I know y'all not allowing any new ones in, but the ones we have here, we do get new trailers. Some people will buy a new house, get rid of the old one, trade it in and bring another one and set it down in the same spot. Never moved the address, but got a new house. So, we run into that. So, and it's just, I just don't wanna know how to address the issue or, leave that old trailer sitting there, or do I move it and take the risk of putting another one back, and then I gotta do a setback, and then I'm all out of whack. So, cause you moving a house out and moving a house in, it's not like a camper. So I just wanna know if that new house is gonna have that setback rule applied to it, or can we just be grandfathered like it is, and we set back in the same pads, cause all my water lines, electric lines are run to them pads. Sewer
Mr. Turner,
lines
that
too.
might be a question for you.
I was just looking at the ordinance, trying to find an answer for
Me
you.
too.
And I believe the answer, but don't hold me to this, is that if you have an existing lawfully permitted, manufactured home park, so that's different than the RV, camper trailers that the gentlemen were talking about. If you pull out an old non-conforming manufactured home, you have to put in a conforming one,
Okay.
but the layout of the park stays the same.
Oh, yeah,
Now, let me just, while you're chatting,
okay.
make sure I'm not misspeaking.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. What else caught us off guard on this? I had a note in here. That's manufactured. Another thing I didn't see, y'all were, this is back to y'all, I don't do campers and all, but y'all were telling that guy to move them in 180 days, but yet at the same time, the candidates, y'all set y'all's trailers up on, a camper up on there for students for 5 years. Can y'all grandfather something? Because I know what they're talking about, these workers, because they're calling us daily. It's nowhere to rent here now, nowhere. No motel, no campsites. There's people calling South Boston Danville to come over here and work, because they don't have any place to stay over here now. The rentals are gone. And I don't know how to address to get any more here, or, campsites or whatever, but I'm just saying, dude, we done lost so many houses, and we got so much going on now, we don't have the people living here to work the jobs. They're having to come out of Danville, South Boston, and, surrounding areas just to get here to work because there's nowhere to stay. And that's kinda crazy. So I'm running into the same problem right now. My employees are coming all the way from Johnson County. So, and Raleigh. But I just think it's more time needs to be spent, and each subject needs to be covered. Like in the building part, you need to get some contractors in here to talk about that part. Short-term rentals, you need to get them in here and talk about it, because they, like I said, they already underground. They're going that fast. And people pulling out of Airbnb because they're just saying they're not Airbnb, it's just family. That's what they say. So, I mean, you're running into it, it's already there. But I did like one thing, I was in the planning and zoning meeting, and Mr. Tommy Wagstaff said something in that meeting. He said, "Who asked for this change?" I ain't figured that out yet, because there's nothing, if it's not broken, we ain't trying to fix it. I mean, we're just replacing a tile. So, I mean, that's something to think about also, but anyway, thank y'all for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Jay.
The next speaker we had is Julie Mabey.
Good morning.
Morning.
First, I would like to thank the outgoing elected officials for your dedication to the board. That I have enjoyed working with you all. I've seen your selfless dedication, and I really appreciate that. As a citizen of Person County, I've seen you at so many events and volunteering, even Veterans Day, and so many things. I really appreciate that. I commend you for the efforts that you've been making on trying to unify this ordinance. I echo previous comments that have been raised. And one thing to keep in mind, Unified Development Ordinance is a living, breathing document. It's going to be subject to change and amendments, and depending on the outcome of this, I'll be submitting an application to amend the ordinance on short-term rentals if it goes forward as it is. But one thing that I would like to do, though, is that when you're taking input from everybody, that would also be including the other departments and how, where did the 180 days go? How about the septic systems? How does this impact your department, and get those feedback? The same thing for the 5,500-foot setback. How does that affect your existing campgrounds and parks? Are you going to be able to expand it? Why can't we have, again, I mentioned cabins in campgrounds. We have that in 2 of our existing parks. So get the feedback from the other departments and make them feel, and that was a point, I could have brought something forward, but without getting input from the planning director and those other departments, I would be doing the same thing, and the stakeholders. It's really, really important to draw everybody in on that. And I think good progress has been made, but, you know, as the chair mentioned, we weren't aware of this towards the tail end of this. And so I thank you all for your time and your dedication so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's all of the individuals currently signed up to speak, but we did have others that walked in that did not sign up.
And do they desire to speak?
Does anybody desire to speak that is not signed up?
Okay. Hearing none then, okay. All right, we want to start at the top of that list and work our way down on this discussion.
That's fine. I do just, may I take a minute
Sure,
to share with the board, just to kind of remind you about how all this process started, because I know there's a question as far as whether there's been adequate participation or adequate feedback sought. So going back to May 16th of 22, you did appoint the UDO steering committee, and at that time, the steering committee appointments were Marley Spencer, who was with the TDA at the time, Sherry Clayton, who's a realtor, and Barry Allen, who is a citizen, Mark Duncan, Norman Boyette, and Frank Stoltman. So we did have representation, and Derek, you were on the steering committee, I believe, but those were the citizen appointments that I just listed. So we did have representation on that committee. We had involvement from EDC, of course, the planning director, 2 planning director staff were involved in that as well. So, so it was 1 BOC member, planning board member, economic development director, designee, 5 citizens, landowners, business owners in the county, and 2 planning staff members. So the UDO process did involve those members of the public, and again, those were public meetings that were open as they went through the process. And then with the planning board, we have noticed all of those meetings and provided information to the public about what was being discussed each time. So this has been a very lengthy process, 2.5 years or so that we've been going through the document. And of course, it's been available within the public realm. The draft has been available on the planning board website for months for review. So there has been quite a bit of opportunity for involvement and for feedback as time goes along. I know that this is not always on the forefront, or, you know, sometimes it just takes that little push to say, oh, yes, I need to get to this now, or maybe I personally was not aware going of the process as it went along. But we have made great effort to make sure that this has been out in the public realm with opportunity for feedback. In hindsight, there are some things that we could have done differently as far as potentially convening some small work groups or going more in depth with individual departments. So that has been noted and could be a part of a future process or an ongoing process with this particular document. But I did just want to remind you all of what the process has looked like and the opportunity for involvement. So the planning board has gone through this extensively, and of course that is also made up of representatives from the public, and staff have been involved in that process as well and taken that feedback to get us to this current version. Yeah, I'll be glad to go through the comments that have been brought up, and we can see if we can make some revisions or decide what we need to do
Okay.
about it.
I do have a question. During this over 2-year time span of trying to put this plan together, why weren't we presented some updates on what was going on? We're supposed to go to the county website and read this, or
Yeah, I think I
is this,
don't.
I feel like I've been
Right.
blindsided myself.
Okay. So there's been information that I've shared in weekly updates as far as where we were in the process, but I don't know that there was an update provided to the commissioners in a board meeting format prior to the presentation that Chris made after the planning board had recommended it. We were just following that process.
Nor would there be a protocol for
There
that.
could have been.
The
I mean,
information sought was committee, and that was for planning and zoning and how they structured and developed this plan. It was not primarily to us, which you're free to go online and look at it, but the purpose was to get information for planning and zoning to develop the UDO.
And just the periodic updates that were shared, I had shared via email with the board through the process of weekly updates. And then Chris had come and presented it to you all at the meeting prior to adoption. So, there was opportunity for feedback or questions at that time to determine if we needed to regroup prior to bringing it forward for approval.
So how long did we have Chris on board here?
Chris actually started after this
That's what I thought.
steering committee, so July of '22 is when he started. So this got started under our former planning director, Lori Oakley.
When this first started,
Mm-hmm.
we had a consultant group.
Right.
And I think in the meetings I attended, it was really run by that consulting group. And then they would take and go over the ordinance and reword the ordinance and what have you. Then we would have input on that. And I think some of the members that were on that committee became disenchanted with it, if you will, and because they felt like it was just being run by the consultant. It was put together, the ordinance, the UDO, and it was going, and I think it was presented or going to be presented to us at that time. And then we said, wait a minute, there was so many questions, so many concerns with that, what that consultant had put together for us. And that's when it went back to zoning and planning, and then they broke it down into individual sections.
Right.
And went through it step by step. And so when we look at timing, that's what really extended the time, is because you had a finished UDO ordinance, but it was mostly done by the consultant. And so, then it went back to the drawing board, if you will, to make changes.
Right.
So, I do agree with a lot of things that were said here today. I do agree that, we need to consult, RV owners, I think, and see the needs that they have. When this came out to us, my number one concern was the short-term rentals. And it's still a concern, and I think it's something we need to go back to the drawing board. And some of the things that were listed here, we need to take and, into consideration. I do believe that our new zoning and planning director needs to be familiar with these and not be thrown under the bus when he gets here. And so I do think that these items that were listed today should go back to either zoning and planning, to review the ordinances, especially the short-term rentals, and make adjustments that need to be made and present it back to our county commissioners at a later date. That's all.
I would say all along in observing planning and zoning, what they did, and then in reviewing some of these items, and y'all have expressed your concerns for 2 meetings now. I have a whole new appreciation for planning and zoning and what they do and what they have done. It will be a forever moving target, as maybe mentioned there. No matter what the outcome of our decisions are here today and going forward, there will always be a need for review and ever changing, because it's not going to stay, it's not going to be the same. So again, I have, as I said, thought a lot about what planning and zoning has done, and out of that comes where we are today, that we've got these issues. And even though they put all that time in it, we've got things here we need to look at. I think some of these mentioned here, we can decide today. Some others, no. I think they're gonna have to be set aside, as Commissioner Sims said, and take a deeper dive into the implications of and how to get some of those things squared away to the benefit of the county and the public and each individual organization we're talking about.
I totally agree. A lot of what Sperry said made sense. Excuse me. You asked for specifics and what you want to change. The 40 by 70 makes perfect sense instead of having the 25 by 100. I mean, you sit there and think about it. That don't make a lot of common sense. That was one of the ones that I wrote down that really made sense. And of course, the 500 feet, I think we all agree that just needs to be taken completely out. 50 foot makes common sense on that. The 180-day limit, I don't know how you could do this. I just wondered if you could make certain areas in his trailer park where if he has workers that are here for an extended period of time, they could be allotted at one spot. Maybe divide the spots up where, say you're gonna have this traveler come in and they're only staying a couple days, have them allotted at one section where you have your extended stayers at another spot. I don't know if that's an option. I'm just talking out loud.
And on that, Mr. Thomas, if that's the direction the board wants to go, I could work with Catherine and try and bring back something, because I think there are a couple ways you could slice it. Another idea, the gentleman spoke about how, they're fortunate they're on water and sewer, which may be a different consideration than someone who's operating on septic and well. So the board wants, we could look at some options.
That was also written in the ordinance on Article 4, where it says that RV parks are to provide a pump and haul, even though they have their own septic tank system. So that's kind of, don't make sense either.
Well, the time limitation's there, and as you said, just speak out loud here. Knowing what we need in the way of housing here that's well addressed and well documented, it's a fact. And we've talked about that for a long time. We want economic growth in Person County, and part of that, going back several years, if and when it comes, then we would need these parks. And so it's it's a major concern. How you do that, I don't know, but a thought of mine was, and you gentlemen that are in the business can share your opinions of what I'm thinking. Rather than 180 days, why don't we develop some sort of plan there where you could have a time allotted to stay, say, 3 to 5 years, but have an application process every 12 months. At the end of each year, you re-up that application and you just stay where they are. And then the second year, you go into your agreement and you give them 1 year extension and let that be up to 3 to 5 years. I mean, I know 7 years has been mentioned, but then the other thing that's been mentioned is permanent residence. So how do you qualify that? So that's a thought of mine to let your customers sign up for a year, and at the end of that year, you sign an agreement for another year and let that run for consecutive years of 3, 4, 5, whatever you may want.
That way they don't have to physically move the trailer.
No. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I've looked at a variety of different ways this comes through in ordinances, and I think there's some entities that want to limit it to make sure they're seeing the turnover. I have not seen specific wording, like this one right now talks about fewer than 180 consecutive days. So that's out there. I think whatever language worked its way into ours was an example from others that were reviewed as part of this process. But I'm sure that we can find something that fits for wanting to be able to promote this as a workforce housing opportunity and put something, some wording in that would allow those extended stays with certain provisions, because we recognize that's a need, but just have a way to make sure it doesn't go on forever. I don't know if there's a
Do we want to put that
specific.
in a category of table that particular component and address it later? Is that what you saying, thinking, what do y'all think? We can,
Well, Mr. Chairman, and first off, I want to thank everyone for attending today. And, you know, this is what I wanted, was an open work session, because it sounds like there hasn't been an open work session with stakeholders to receive their input, because you're all the experts on the specifics involved with this ordinance as it relates to you and your businesses. And if you remember, I did ask, I had hopes that we would have had a planning director by this time. That's the reason I made the motion to wait till we had a planning director. However, unfortunately, things don't work as you plan out to do, but I did think it was prudent to start having this conversation with the stakeholders, even if we didn't have a planning director. And I'm in agreement. I do not want to bring a planning director in when everything is hot, everything's uncertain. I've got a lot of questions regarding this, not just related with the RV parks, but with short-term rentals. There's parts on here saying that planning and zoning would be the one issuing permits for boat docks on it. And last I know, that's the Lake Authority's position. And I'm not throwing any shade. I'm not saying anything negative about the planning board, the committee that did this. I think everyone absolutely did their best And the chairman is right, this is a moving target. And it sounds like there was probably some conversation between the consultants who fully didn't know Person County and how it was gonna affect, and getting some pushback from the committee members, and that may have caused, some friction there. The one thing about this across the board, I mean, even from the zoning perspective, we have people that, own businesses in the county, and the moment they sell, that are grandfathered in, and the moment they sell the business, they can't sell it as a business for commercial purposes, because the zoning has changed on it, and it affects how that that property can be sold, which isn't fair to the property owner. And like with I'm against the 180-day rule. I think the 50-foot setback from any property line is very fair. The lighting, but the question is brought up: what even defines a campsite? And because if we don't define, going back to the 4.97B with the pavement, well, if you only have 2 or 3, why did we need pavement? You're not going to have that much traffic on it, so I don't think that's been defined yet. Going back also from previous notes at the official public hearing, this ordinance does prohibits cabins involved. Now, we've just heard there's no place to rent in this county. Why can't we include cabins in the ordinance to be acceptable as short-time rentals on that as well? From family subdivisions, 3-lot subdivisions, to must be 5 acres, and possibly changing a definition of the subdivision. There's just a lot here, and when you approve something, you want to try to get it right as much as possible, and there's always going to be some unintended consequences when you approve something of this magnitude. But the one thing I don't want to see is going forth, we receive, we didn't realize that. All right, let's do a text amendment. All right, text amendment, public hearing with the planning board. Got to come to us for a public hearing. And, I'd like to limit as many text amendments as possible, because there are going to be some that we, whether it's this board or the next board that does approve it. We're on this board, that's all I'm focusing on right now. But, it's a lot to digest, and I've received a lot of input on this, and it's just too broad for me right now to just put a rubber stamp on. And I think we need to give our suggestions to planning and zoning, to the county manager, and ask the planning board to re-review the documents with our suggestions to it, because I do think the changes that we're making, that we will be making, end up being kicked back to the planning board on it, because we have a whole article 4-21-G for short-term rentals, and I think the stakeholders with TDA and others need to be involved with that process. And I think having the planning board having work sessions like this would be prudent. And I understand that puts more time on them, and they're not paid. And look, if they're just like with ENR, we're gonna be meeting so much with the tax revow next year. They're paid, so that may be something this board, if planning and zoning is putting to work into this, and it's going to take more than 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings, to maybe we ought to look at giving them some compensation, because their time's valuable too, and they're not getting paid for it. And so that's just my thoughts on it. But I do think either which way we can make these decisions now, and make the changes, it's still ultimately going to end up going back to the planning board.
That's why I said a while ago, I have a whole new appreciation for those people and the work they did. Meeting a couple of times a month and lengthy at that, so it was quite a challenge. Yes, sir.
I agree with Mr. Prill about making suggestions and forward it on to the planning board, but let's keep this simple. When a camper calls in, we ask, how long do you wanna stay? If they give us, whether it be week, month, or a couple years, 3, 4, 5 years, that's fine. If it's permanent, no, that's just it. That's the way we operate. Now, when the county approved our permit 4 or 5 years ago, we were permitted to have cabins, to build cabins on our site, but we just have not done it. But we are permitted. I guess now we're grandfathered. Just a thought.
Mr. Berryhill, one question, what would be your recommendation to the 180-day rule? You had one suggestion from the chairman, 3 to 5 years. What is your suggestion?
Do away with it, just as long as it's not a permanent situation, because we don't want permanent.
So it'd be up to the property owner.
Right.
To make that
And,
decision.
and another thing we ask, the first, now, how long they want to stay, and then how old is your camper? I mean, we don't want a 15 to 20-year-old camper coming in because it's falling apart to start with. I mean, just keep a decent place, a clean place, modern-looking place, nice, quiet.
No, some of the beach rentals, there is a year limit on the.
I understand that, yeah, and it should be. I mean, you want to turn over in that area. You want to turn over at the lakes. People enjoy the lakes.
Right.
But, you know, like I say in the beginning, there are two types of campers. You know, the vacationers, RVs, and then there are the workers. And we're trying to provide for the workers, mostly, that's what we have. Even though we get some people that, you know, go to the lake because of, and we at one time was an overflow for the lakes here in the county. But, you know, as much development and going on in the county and around, I mean, we're staying full of workers, mostly.
I think that was the goal, was that those customers were the primary concern.
Yeah.
It was not the tourist, so to
Mhm.
speak, that
Yeah.
stay a day or 2 or 3 and move on. It wasn't that.
And
so.
if we've got spaces open, we accept those. Thank you.
Mr. Hill,
Something,
one
Yes,
more
sir.
question. When you do your applications from the renters, they're stating on their purpose?
No, we don't ask what they do, right?
Well, that's not written. I will ask.
But you have verbal communications.
Right.
You know why they're there.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'd say throw that 180 day out the window.
That's our recommendation.
It's mine too.
If we're talking about relaxing the 180-day stay, there are, you know, the luxurious lake Airbnbs, accommodations, there are some like that in the county, and then there's some less luxurious or just basic. So if we start talking about tourists versus workforce, you know, anything over 90 days, we don't collect occupancy taxes anyway. But I guess that would that go back to just a lease between a homeowner as to how long you stay? Or is that gonna be totally an RV park situation?
I think they're two different.
I think it's completely separate.
Yeah.
I think that's a RV park section, not related to tourism. That's the way,
Yeah, it's in that is specifically, the reference to 180 is in the RV section,
Okay, so,
um,
excuse me.
I think. I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
sorry to jump too, something else that was brought to my attention was the article number 2. The duties of planning and zoning, is kind of mixed up because, it states that, stop work orders, that comes from building inspections. It shouldn't come from planning and zoning. And then the same with utilities. To my meaning.
So,
Is that
if
not
I could,
correct?
if I could address that.
Absolutely.
So building inspections, absolutely, you know, someone's doing something, they haven't pulled permits, inspector goes out, stop work order. The legislature a few years ago made explicit authority for stop work orders to be issued by zoning administrators, but it's gotta be for a zoning related matter. So you don't have, your planning director going out and dealing with building permitting issues. But say someone is, you know, we actually had this happen in a town I work in. They were building an illegal garage, and it wasn't a building code issue, it was illegal under zoning. And so they issued a stop work order. So that's when you see that.
Okay, so we're gonna pretty much develop a list that will go to planning and zoning for their further consideration.
That's fine. I have
Alright.
the list that Charlie had provided at the last meeting, so I've gone through all of those. I've also taken the comments from today and from the last meeting and have done some additional research on that. So yes, moving forward, I have all of this information that I can provide to the new planning director when that person is selected and starts. We're still in the recruitment phase, an extended recruitment phase for that position, since our last offer fell through. So yes, I have all of these notes. I mean, we can definitely make some changes to make it more user-friendly, to address some of the needs that have come up. And as you've said, it is
Okay.
a living document, but we can do some more work to get it closer to where you want it before it's approved.
Okay, to put it simple, remove the 180-day restriction there and let that become the park owner's responsibility. So, pretty
All right,
pretty
and
good. And also, the 500-foot issue, and again, it may have been in a conversation with Mr. Bowley while he was here, but I distinctly remember that was left and overlooked when that was sent to us.
Okay.
Not 500 feet, but it was either 50 or 75. I don't know which would be the best. I would suggest.
It may have been a typo. Maybe it was supposed to be 50 and that extra
So,
zero got in there.
I
So,
do recall, and for whatever value that is, I do remember that. So which is appropriate, and you guys know the business, 50 or 75?
He said 50.
50 is good,
50.
okay, it's good with me, so that would be
Mhm.
part of it, and, Ms. maybe you have a,
Yes, just, whatever the proposed changes, could they be highlighted in a different font, so it's more,
like a red line?
yeah.
It should be. That was one of my concerns about when we first had that 370 pages, that it should have been redlined. And I talked to Mr. Bowley about that back then, but it didn't ever happen, but.
and I know that was a desire of the planning board as well. And we go back to the why, as far as why we're doing this. Part of it was related to better defining the zoning districts and the permitted uses, and also taking the various 10 ordinances that we have and pulling them together into one document. I know as I was doing this research, I would bounce back and forth to try to figure out what was the language in our existing ordinances, whether that's the subdivision ordinance or the airport ordinance or the planning ordinance. So this is pulling everything together, and it's making sure that we're complying with current laws. So those were all the whys. And it did get very unwieldy as far as trying to track changes. So I know that's kind of gotten lost. So going forward, if we're working from this one document, we can highlight changes that are made to it, and then we can still try to work, as I've said, I've tried to refer to some of the current language in our discussion today, but that requires just kind of tracking back to the original document to figure out where certain things have changed. But unfortunately, we don't have a complete redlined version going from the 10 ordinances into the one.
And in part of your feedback, to go back, do you have item 4.6.42 regarding the maximum density, no greater than 2,500, change, given a recommendation from changing it from 25 feet by 100 to 70 feet by 50?
Well, maybe we just leave it 2,500, because then that offers flexibility in terms of the actual layout of the sites. There may be, and again, I don't have enough expertise in this area to know why 25 by 100 was proposed, but you're describing a 2,800 square foot, so that exceeds the 2,500 minimum threshold. So it may be that for certain configurations of RV parks, it makes sense to have the longer, more narrower lots. For some, it might make sense to have them a bit wider and shorter because the layout fits better on the property. So maybe just leaving it at 2,500 minimum.
And allow the flexibility of designing that park as the owner sees fit.
As long
To-
as it can
to-
accommodate a parking space
Right.
as described and other, aspects that are required on each site. That's just a suggestion.
That's, sounds good to me.
I think that's more prudent.
Okay,
Well, I mean, I think increasing it to 3,500, that's just my opinion.
I don't know.
So,
I can go
Well,
there
if
too.
we lower, if you lower that, would mess your whole park up.
Well,
Because
he's,
you're at 40 by 70, and you want to take it in. We take it in at 2,500.
Well, that's a minimum.
Okay.
So exceeding that
Bigger space.
on a
Okay.
space is fine. The 2,500 is the current language, and that's just the minimum. So that's what was in place when they applied, but their sites exceed that, and that met the requirements of the ordinance.
And they're grandfathered in.
And if
They're
I can just-
grandfathered in.
And just to tag on to that, I think adding just the requirement that you have to accommodate a parking space, so sort of minimum design standards are there. That allows flexibility for the operator to design what fits to their site. So I think Manager Kathy's suggestion is a good one.
wait a minute, you're saying the 25, all right, you're saying the 2,500 is a minimum, but the way this reads is a prototypical pad and set at a maximum density no greater than 2,500.
Okay,
Now, that's setting the max.
okay,
But what's the inset? That's what I
Yeah.
question.
okay. We'll look at that. Okay, that's,
My permit had a minimum.
Yeah, that definitely needs to be changed.
big as you wanted to with the minimum.
Okay.
okay. We'll look at that language. Yeah, I mean, under the current ordinance, it says density to be 2,500 square feet for each tent or trailer space.
Yeah.
So we'll look at that language.
Right.
Yeah, and Mr. Purrier, just on that, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's confusing language, but
Right.
I see it saying prototypical pad inset at a maximum density no greater than 2,500 square feet. So I'm reading that as you can't pack them in any more than 2,500
Right.
square
Okay.
feet.
Because it
But
says a minimum
but-
dimension of 25 times
But it-
100, so,
It could certainly be more clearly worded
Yeah,
at a
right.
minimum.
okay.
And with the driveway, you get the clarification regarding the driveway into, that would be 7B, internal circulation of a 25-foot wide stabilized driveway with the base and sub-base paved areas to direction flow, and that needs to be defined as to how many
Right.
sites are there.
because I think my understanding of this ordinance is an RV park is going to be anything that's permitted for trailers to come in and stay on a continuous basis. I mean, for recreational purposes. So that might be one or two or three. So if the paving provision is really meant to apply or is more desirable in parks where there's heavier traffic, then we might want to set a threshold for paving is required for parks with X amount or more.
My park, I got 11 sites and I got 4 driveways.
Paved?
Three to some, 4 to some.
Okay.
What's your current maximum, square footage on lot?
25 to 2,600.
Okay. And you got a 500-foot buffer?
50.
50, okay. I misunderstood you, I'm sorry. So you're still under you haven't been adopted into this yet? Good.
And some additional feedback clarification on the LED lighting.
Yeah, that's my next box to check.
Right, and we'll get some clarification. When I read that, I'm not reading it to mean that it just has the lighting plan. So what are you going to do with the lighting? Not necessarily requiring a certain amount, but we'll check on that to make sure.
Is that to be sort of a park owner management decision, or is it overrun of government here that we gotta
What
regulate.
this just says is, as part of the site plan that would be submitted for approval, that it would include the lighting plan using LED lights with directional downward light fixtures and light posts at a maximum height
So
of
you-
15 feet. So it's providing some guidelines for the lighting that's included on the plan, but it doesn't say you have to have them every, 20 feet or anything
So
like
you-
that. It just says,
In essence, there is
Show.
a mandate there, or pretty much what you're saying.
to
and
put
see
the
it.
lighting, the exterior lighting
Yeah.
on the plan.
Yeah, okay.
Well, my question, who's gonna enforce, who's enforcing all these? Is it the planning and zoning?
So planning and zoning would be reviewing the site plan to determine whether it meets the specifications in the ordinance. And then they're issuing a zoning permit, and in issuing the permit, it's saying you're agreeing to comply with these regulations. So then going forward, it's complaint driven. They're not going out and measuring the lighting after the fact. If you installed 30-foot lights in a year and we got a complaint about that, then that would be something that our code enforcement officer would go out and check. It may be that, now maybe the RV, the visitors were concerned about safety and security, were making a lot of complaints, and the RV park owner decided to install all these bright lights everywhere, and then the neighbors got upset because of all the lighting, bleeding over into their property, and then they make a complaint. That's when planning and zoning, the code enforcement officer would go out and take a look, and if it were no longer in compliance with the site plan and the permit that was issued, that's when there would be a notice of violation issued to correct that.
How many code enforcement officers do we have?
We have one part-time code enforcement officer.
Part-time?
We contract with state code enforcement for a code enforcement officer through planning and zoning who is here one day a week on Wednesdays. So that's the extent.
And an 8-hour workday.
That's been, this is
that's a
our
busy
third,
person.
it's been our third year, and it's been a great help. But yes, we don't have very, good staffing in that area. So we are tackling what we can in terms of the complaints that are coming in.
I see the concern about lighting, but I'm concerned about just, putting mandates on these owners that, really aren't necessary. Let it be controlled within the individual park. And, if we put certain language in there, like it has to be a LED, and it has to be so many feet apart, and on and on and on, into weeds of oversight and control, I'm not in favor of going
So-
that
I'm not
route.
either. I think our goal should be to let the landowner, he needs to be the one that's in charge of his land. That's what
I think
he's.
each trailer would have its own lights, so to speak. So, go ahead, sir.
As stated, I stated earlier that most of the campers do have some sort of external light. And they, we have had complaints about his neighbor, his light shining into their camper, and they didn't like it. They preferred it to be dark. And we were completely green about drawing up plans for this park. It was done by architect and engineers, and they did not provide any external light for our park. And there's one other thing in there I forgot to bring up about a central telephone. Now, everybody's got cell phones for emergency use. Now, when we built our pool, it's mandated that we have a 911 telephone in there. When you pick it up, you're talking. You don't have to do anything. You just talk it up and you can answer, pick up the receiver, and you're directly talking to 911. But that's only in the pool area. But for the whole park, I can't see it.
And that requirement about phones is in there?
It is.
Yeah.
It
so
says an operational phone for public use centrally located within the site.
I think that
which-
needs to go.
Yeah, just wipe that out.
Yeah. Okay, so what are we going to recommend as far as lighting? What are your
So
words?
and that's up to you all. I think, Chris's objective was to put some, provisions in here to guide how these parks came together. I don't see the lighting as being required. It's just if you're doing the lighting, put it on the site plan so we know what you're doing and use these particular bulbs. I'm guessing because they're more energy efficient. I'm not sure why it would be specifically stated LED.
Well, that-
And then, not greater than 15 feet on the poles is a way just to limit the lighting and facing downward to the confines of the property.
Well, the use of LED would, it makes common sense, but it should be up to the park owner, I think. I don't-
So y'all can let me know what your recommendation is, if you want to strike
Okay.
the lighting or just pull out the LED wording, or
I think we strike it and let the developer decide that with their design architect and owners.
do you think it would be helpful to show the lighting on the plan, whatever the lighting is, or are you suggesting that because that's part
It's
of the
optional.
electrical and
It would be optional.
eventually that has to be reviewed, I guess,
Yeah, it would be optional, I think.
to include, whether or not to include.
Mhm.
I think the
Okay.
landowner could get feedback from their, tenants as the years go by, and they could go by that.
Okay. Now, the 50-foot issue Mr. Garrett brought up, and it's also talked about by Mr. Berryhill as well. Now, is that all? We're settled with that?
I heard
Is that-
the preference to
is that
change
okay?
500 to
All right.
50.
All right. And, gosh, I don't know, I've got so many notes here now. How about the paving requirement?
I- Identifying a number or, under
Yeah.
what circumstances, what is that threshold for paving? Is it the number of users anticipated on a particular drive? Is it the number of RV units? We can go back and revisit that. I don't know that we have an answer for that today, but looking at establishing some criteria for when the paving would be
Anybody have an
required.
opinion on that?
Well, it has to be a minimum of how many RVs will be in that lot. That's just common sense to me.
So the recommendation would be based on minimum?
I would
So
say
we
so.
just,
I would say
okay. Is that all right? Ken?
To be defined what the minimum is, but
Yes.
establishing a minimum.
Well, yeah, and I think the issue is, and the gentleman spoke to that, you have a large enough park, you're worried about dust, paving makes sense. But as our ordinance is written right now, anything over 1 unit, so 2 units or more is a RV park. So it sounds like you wanna have some number, 2 to some number of units, we're not gonna require paving. And I think Catherine's point is, we just need to define that, so it's clear in the ordinance.
Are there other minimums related to 2, 3, or 4 that quantifies or qualifies it as a park? Anything here that would override, or
So there's provisions within our ordinance about just having an RV on a property for a temporary period of time, maybe during a residential construction process or in the event of an emergency. So there's certain provisions that apply to just kind of these one-offs with an RV that are not in an RV park. But once you get to having a place that's not storage, where somebody is actually occupying an RV, then you're getting into the RV park situation, because
and
those other ordinance provisions don't apply in that
and
situation.
that's clearly defined in the language?
So there's various sections that refer to recreational vehicles, and the earlier provisions are kind of pulled over from our existing ordinance, and I'm trying to get back to the language. But again, it relates to if someone is constructing a new residence, they can get permitted to have an RV on their property for a period of time and live in it while they're constructing their house. or maybe they've had a flooding emergency and they need to move out of their house and occupy an RV for a period of time.
Is that time stated there? I had
It
one in
is,
my
I'm trying to
neighborhood.
find it.
Yes, sir.
If it's two sites and they collecting rent, it might be a park.
Okay. Well, you want them to sort of mirror each other. You don't want them to be in conflict with each other.
Right, so here's some of the language. Use of one camper or recreational vehicle shall be permitted as an accessory dwelling on an improved lot that has an existing principal residential dwelling for a period of up to 90 days due to certain things here. So that's, again, that's a temporary use on a property with a primary dwelling.
Something else to think about, like in my situation, I got 4 RVs on one driveway, 4 RVs on another driveway, 3 RVs on one driveway, 4 RVs on another driveway. So you got 11 sites, or 15 sites, whatever, but you just don't have that many on a driveway. See, depending on the layout.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so what is your recommendation there? Read what you might recommend as far as paving.
I don't have a recommendation. I do not know. I think that it would be good to go and look at some other examples to see if there's a threshold that's been established elsewhere, and just give someone who has a little more expertise in that area could come up with some proposed language there.
Is there any language that says, I'm gonna build a RV park, and is to qualify for that, it must be 3 or 4 or 1 or?
It really, what it says right now is if you have more than one, you have one, it can be an accessory, to your house under
Right,
certain
but
conditions.
that's- Yeah.
More than one that you're offering for rent, that's an RV park. The other thing I'd say about the paving, we'd want to check with building inspections or with the fire marshal, because sometimes there are requirements about paving for fire access.
Okay, Mr. Poindexter, your question about the setback, you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine right there. I mean, if you take out, I'm looking at mobile home. So if you take out a single wide on a mobile home park, can you put a new one back in? Would that have to rule the setbacks?
I'll check the ordinance, and we can get back with you with the draft language.
Okay.
If you'll just catch me at the end of the meeting, give me your email address, I'll make sure somebody gets with you.
One question regarding and I know we eliminated the 180 days altogether, but also requiring each campground RV park to maintain a registry logbook. Do y'all currently have an active logbook for your park?
Well, we have a software, a system on the computer that we can pull it up, but, and when we sign them in, it's a rental contract.
Okay. The only reason I'm asking is it's asking for the VIN number for each vehicle, and that information, according to this in section F, will be available for verification purposes of Person County staff upon request, and existing campgrounds will also be required to comply with the logbook requirement upon the adoption of that.
No, we don't keep the VIN number. I don't get a driver's license number.
Okay.
Do
So the
we-
logbook was a common provision, and I'll say, I don't know, we
Can we strike
had
that?
an RV for 8 years, and I don't think I ever gave the
Well, that was my
VIN number,
comment. Is it,
ever, and I just don't, I think that it would be in the owner's interest to be able to track, like you said, through a software, and I think that serves the purposes of a logbook, who's there at any given time. You know, that's just, I think, something that you would want to refer back to if anything happened, you know, have a history of who was there. And in general, know what do you ask about the vehicle they're driving? Do you get like a make and model?
I think we should
You
leave
too,
that
Mr. Garrett.
logbook
About the VIN.
requirement up to the discretion of the individual campsite
I
owners.
don't think we need it.
And you do it however you want to do it on that, so
Yeah.
I think we need to just strike that.
And I did see that as a commonality in ordinances that I looked at. And again, I don't know the exact underlying reason for that. And it may track back to again, it's in the section about the time that they're staying there. So we can look at there may be some model language to
At the top of the list,
redo
I would
that.
say leave it out, but it should be left at the discretion of the park owner or operator. And, some may have a different opinion as to why they might or might not need that, so leave it up to them.
And, go ahead.
Yeah.
I have a question on Article 4, number 8. Short-term rentals should be used for only lodging, no other uses. Does that even, I mean, say somebody wants to have a family reunion for a weekend, I mean, they can't do that. Do we even need that in there? Does that make sense to anybody?
You want-
I don't, Article 4, number 8. And short-term rentals shall only be used for lodging and no other uses shall be prohibited. I mean,
So-
is that,
Well,
I,
I mean, if they wanna have a family reunion at the lake at a short term, I mean, why we stop?
commercial
make sense to me.
venues, assemblies, weddings.
I mean, is that even necessary to have in there?
My bet is that was being driven, you know, that particular provision was included in response to concerns about crowds showing up, you know, that may be concerns from neighbors about vehicles and crowds or using
it's
that
understandable.
for something other than, you know, exceeding the capacity of the
Also
unit.
goes back to the,
Okay.
sewer,
Yeah.
capacity for that particular house, but, maybe do you wanna?
I was gonna say too,
Mhm.
what if I wanted to lease my house out for a short-term rental while I was in Florida or on a holiday? Does that mean I can occupy it as a residence and live there and then maybe for a couple of months, be able to rent it out as a short-term rental? I think that just needs to be clarified. You should be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't take it to prohibit that, but, you know, this is just my reading of it, but that could be clearer.
All right, want to address making it more flexible. As you heard, there's already been a plan approved in the county to allow cabins to be used for workforce housing on it. I'm assuming they can do it whenever they want to because it was part of their plan when it was approved back in 2017. But I guess to make it easier and put less red tape, I think we need to have a section that does permit cabins itself to be used as campground sites for temporary workforce housing.
So there is
And
actually a
because
definition.
it is a personal, I mean, it's gonna be a permanent
Mhm.
structure, but that's not listed in the ordinance
Yeah, and
as being permitted.
there's a definition that says a site cabin, a site-built or manufactured dwelling unit used for temporary overnight occupancy, typically within a campground, RV park, or park setting. But then it says no cabins. And I mean, for example, we have cabins at Mayo Lake, so I'm not sure why it says no cabins. So, I mean, that could be removed. I mean, we have an example of a site plan here that's already been approved with cabins. But there could be something I'm missing. Somebody else could have been part of that discussion and know why it was not.
I think it should be removed.
You remove
Any other
that.
thoughts on
Strike
that?
and that it can be permitted for temporary workforce housing.
Simple enough. Yeah.
Or just, yeah, just add it as a use within campgrounds, you know, and a structure that can be allowed within campgrounds.
I don't see it as being a permanent dwelling. They bring them in on trailers.
Yeah, that was my question,
Well,
is gonna be,
If someone builds the cabin
If
themselves.
they build it from the ground up.
Exactly, and there may be some people that build it from the ground up,
That would be to the landowner's discretion whether or not.
but this doesn't allow that to happen for temporary, for workforce.
I mean, I'm trying to get this to happen.
Yes,
I'm not
yeah,
niching at you to say, but what I'm saying is, you see these factory-built mobile homes, cabins, et cetera, you name it, on the back of a flatbed, being
Mhm.
hauled to somewhere to be set up.
mhm,
And depending on the size of them, they could always be picked back up again and hauled to another site.
mhm,
Just say that site, they abandoned it, they want to move them to another site.
mhm.
that's
All
another
right,
can of
flatbed.
worms, that's,
Hauled to another site.
yeah, that's here, another can of worms here on.
I know.
Well, we're, that's
I'm
what we,
a
that's why
can-
we're having the
I'm a
meeting.
worm
That's
opener.
right. Yeah,
Go
that's-
ahead.
Well, I'm gonna throw you a worm. Have y'all considered tiny houses?
That's,
Yep,
um,
yep.
So you're talking about building cabins, what's the difference?
and
right.
I'm thinking something that requires a foundation, or something that just is brought in and set up on blocks, and then it's subject to move, being able to move it later, but go
I
ahead, sir.
think we both have something to
Yeah.
add.
I was just gonna add, the definition of proposed UDO for cabin is a site-built or manufactured dwelling unit used for temporary overnight occupancy, typically within a campground, RV park, or park setting. So if you build a home from the ground up, yeah, it's not whether it looks like a log cabin or something, but it's just built for dwelling, then it's gotta be building code and all that. This is addressing a temporary structure, and what I'm hearing from the board is that certainly with an RV park, you all would favor allowing a cabin with this definition.
And I think we can just remove the comment, however, or the provision, however, no cabin shall be permitted, and include cabins as something that's allowed in the campground. I did read, and we could, you know, adapt the definition to refer to camping cabins, if we want to make that even more clear. And I had read that there are state building codes that apply to camping cabins. So it's not just throw up something with no regulation, but that type of structure would be allowed. We can reword the wording to allow for that.
How large are those at Mayo Lake, do you
I
recall?
don't know off the top of my head.
Well, it's, you know, you get back to the thing, and we allow this, and we're gonna allow she sheds and, or, modifications within them to fit in that category, or, I don't know, it just.
Well, we have provisions within it about accessory structures, so that's where that's going to fall. I mean, the tiny houses is, definitely something to consider, and I'm not sure how that fits in with the UDO. I can't speak to that without digging in a little more deeply to it, but, specifically with cabins and campgrounds, I think we can reword that, and we can make a note to
I brought
figure out
that
tiny
issue up
houses.
several years ago, it was pre-Bowley, it must have been Lori, but, that we needed to, you know, address the new trend of tiny houses and how they would impact, at that time, our communities, it wasn't the RV parks. So, but I think something to look at and think about.
But just getting back, thank you for bringing, that's something else for the planning board to look at. But I do think this board is in a consensus regarding the cabins, whether it's a permanent foundation or portable cabin that can be permitted on campgrounds for workforce purposes.
or vacation purposes, just within that general
Yes.
category of
Right.
the campground.
Now, going back to section G, lodge and short-term rentals, I think that there needs to be a clear defiance between short-term rentals and the RV park temporary workforce housing. And I know we X'd out the 180 days, to make it discretion to the, park owner, but I think the 180-day rule could fall into the tourism side of things. Is that what y'all were suggesting of, because at some point, if you pass that 180 days, you no longer receive the
And that's the same way with the hotels. If they've got contract workers more than 90 days, they have to rebate the occupancy taxes, or don't collect them.
So short-term rentals, 90 days, anything 90 days and less.
90 days.
That we collect the occupancy taxes.
What are your thoughts on that, Jay? You look like you have something to say.
No, I agree with you.
Okay, so would you wanna change it to, would you just leave that as is with no discretion? Or would you put something,
I mean, that's the law, it's
Okay.
90 days for collection, that's the statute.
Okay.
For us anyway, I'm sure
No.
everybody else.
alright,
Yes, I don't think there's anything in our ordinance that limits occupancy of a short-term rental to 90 days
Okay.
or 180 days, or, that's more up to the property owner as far as what
Okay.
they want to allow.
I think though there is a provision in the short-term rental that deals with if you don't get a zoning permit, that the zoning staff can decide. I think there's a provision in there about 2 notices, and then if you don't get your permit, then they can tell you you can't operate for at least a year. I think they should follow the normal code enforcement process and delete that section completely.
And if I may, I could unpack Ms. Maybe's comments a little bit. So we're talking about code enforcement, and I'll just read the provision that she's talking about. So it says, short-term rental units similar to all uses in this ordinance shall have an active zoning permit prior to lease, rent, use, or occupancy. Any short-term rental not occupying within compliance with the ordinance shall cease operation until a permit is obtained. Short-term rental units receiving greater than 2 notices for operation prior to receipt of zoning permit shall not be able to operate, shall have permit revoked, and may not be able to apply for a new zoning permit for a minimum of 1 year. And what she's contrasting that to is our normal process would be, again, our code officer gets a complaint, they go out and they verify there's a violation, and they issue a notice of violation, but there's not any sort of automatic 1-year revocation. In fact, there's nothing like that for other code enforcement provisions or in the UDO.
so
We are
just
currently-
saying possibly strike out number 2 altogether?
What I would say is if you did strike out number 2 altogether, there are other,
Refer to that section.
there's other code enforcement mechanisms, you just have the normal process. So
Okay.
I think y'all could, I wouldn't have a great concern if you did.
Okay, and so we can strike out 2 and have it refer to the other sections.
Commissioner Greer, how do y'all see this permitting process? What is that gonna look like for a short-term rental? I'm thinking, what do you have to have a short-term rental? You have to have 1 bathroom per 3 bedrooms, or what is the permit that will be issued? What does that look like? What's the application?
So, I don't have the application.
What's the permit?
Right, so there are provisions in here. What I would envision is that the application, you would check off that you're meeting the provisions outlined in the ordinance, and I'm trying to find what those are. Again, going back and forth in so many places at the moment.
Because Catherine, I couldn't keep track of what all the changes were. At one time, there was a max of, what, 2 people in a bedroom, but what about a child in a crib and a baby bed? I mean,
I don't-
just stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't see references to that here.
Back when I was in the planning zone when they were talking about the Airbnbs, and, the way that the biggest complaint was the Airbnbs were advertising sleeps 10, but guess what, for the septic permit, it's 2 bedroom, it's 4 people can sleep there, 4 adults can sleep in a 2 bedroom. It don't matter if you got 15 bathrooms, you got 2 bedrooms,
That's what I said a while ago, the septic system.
and they advertising the wrong, like, you sleep 10, you sleep 12, you got 2, 3 bedroom per, you just waiting for a failure to happen, them sort of
Oh,
systems.
yeah.
It's septic, now they're not on septic, so,
Mhm.
you wait for that thing to die.
I think you go back to the square footage and what was
You
approved.
go by your septic tank, what did your septic tank approved for? How many
Three
bedrooms?
bedroom,
You
four,
approved for three,
five,
you got six.
or two.
Two people per bedroom is what the county goes by.
Okay.
Mhm.
Here
You
it
got it?
is. Sorry, I knew I had read it. So it's G, lodging, short-term rental units, include tourist homes, short-term rental homes, whole house rentals, bed and breakfast, homestays, or other short-term rentals without an on-site manager, and are subject to provisions set forth in General Statute 42A. Shall have an active zoning permit. Okay, so that's the part we had just talked about, the 2 notices in the 1 year. So
Yes, ma'am.
then it talks about number 3, predominantly displaying inside the entryway of the home the names of a local contact person who can respond. And then off-street parking shall utilize the existing driveway provided at the home and shall not utilize areas that are not designated for parking on the lot. Example given, lawns, adjoining streets, sidewalks, or community common areas. No on-street parking, example giving parking in right-of-ways, shall be permitted. The driveway may be expanded between the driveway and the side lot line, provided that stormwater management and building setback regulations are followed and the appropriate permits are obtained prior to work performed. They shall have 1 electrical meter that serves the rental unit and kitchen. Subdivision of the rental unit into multiple rental units and kitchenettes shall not be prohibited. No accessory structures shall be used for rental units. Adhere to the noise ordinance. Waterfront short-term rental units or units within master planned residential developments with water access shall not add boat docks nor shall alter the shoreline, littoral, am I saying that right? Zone or riparian buffers unless permitted by the applicable lake management agency. Short-term rentals shall only be used for lodging and no other uses. We just talked about that provision. Garbage and recycling receptacles shall be provided and emptied at a minimum of once a week and stored in a screened area to the side or rear of the house except on collection day. No garbage or refuse shall be located outside the garbage receptacle. Bulk waste collection costs shall be the responsibility of the property owner and removed at a minimum of once a week. The last part of this is short-term rental units shall not be occupied that exceed existing utility services, mechanical, electrical, or plumbing for the home, including the septic tank capacity as permitted by the Division of Environmental Health. It shall be the responsibility of the property owner to ensure compliance with this requirement.
So that's the
So-
permit, you wanna test all of that?
Yes.
And who's gonna check it?
So what, who's gonna check it? Again, it's gonna be
You're one and only
Complaint
code
driven.
enforcement.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that a lot of the things, so as far as, when a zoning permit is issued on a lot of things, that you've gotta make sure they're compliant with your ordinance, and that could be as much as you could have in, I'm not talking about for residential versus commercial, where they have an as-built site plan for commercial use and have that. Why make when you're going out in the field to do an inspection without an as-built site plan, you almost need, how are you gonna measure all the distances and the setbacks in compliance with the watershed provisions? Something like that. But going back to the short-term rentals, what is an active zoning permit? Delete the language active. What does it mean? It's like you've got a zoning permit or you don't. Because once you've got your zoning permit, you're done. So,
So the word active, and also, and I mean, as far as approving a permit, I'm not sure what would be required to substantiate these provisions, but this would be what would be expected in order for a permit to be
so
issued.
issuing a zoning permit, you could require them to provide a copy of the permit from the environmental health department, showing that what they're proposing does comply, and working in conjunction with each other. If you're not requiring to see garbage separated out for residential, take the provision out of it. I understand, posting on the inside, who's the contact person,
Any other parts of that we need to talk about? Anything? I think one of you gentlemen mentioned animals that within your parks. Is that a concern for these RV parks?
Habitual dog barking.
I got it in my rule, guidelines, no parking.
So, we just say we leave that up to the park owner?
No.
Is that good? I don't have any other, from my notes, anything that we need to address, but we're open. If you got something else you wanna talk about, now's the place, more time.
Did we address the easement as current for 25 and the new ordinance at 50 feet?
We have not.
I didn't think so.
No, sir.
That's very excessive.
So, what are you thinking
Rob,
is
was that-
excessive?
I think it's excessive, and I need to go with the 25 instead of 50, because you only need 12 foot. I mean, if you're gonna make any changes, 25 would be a plenty, because you're doubling the width of the current driveway size.
Can you tell me which section that is?
That's if we decide to change anything on that.
Mr. Palmer,
Is
do
it
you
probably-
know where that is, sir? We're just trying to find it in the ordinance.
Which section
You know where it's
that's in?
located, Charlie?
Huh?
Where's it
Which
located?
section are you in?
Where's it located? Is it Article 4?
On
Where's it?
my UDO concerns, easements, number 11.
Right, I'm trying to locate that provision in the UDO.
Oh, is this the minimum vegetated, well-maintained 50-foot wide buffer yard that you're talking about, Mr. Palmer? Or
What was the question again?
Okay. Mr. Powell's shaking his head.
I
so I'm
don't
trying to
think
find our provision.
y'all are talking about the same thing.
I don't think we are either.
I think that this may be within section 5.1 general site development standards. It talks about if, while access is required across other property ownership to achieve connection to a private or public road or lots located within subdivisions with 3 lots or more, a 50-foot wide access easement shall be recorded across those lots, and a minimum of a 15-foot driveway constructed within that 50-foot wide access easement.
So is this current, or is this recommended?
That's in the recommended language. I think that if that is in the ordinance currently, it would be in the subdivision
You said
ordinance
Article
most
5?
likely.
Okay.
5.1.
It's 5.1.4A. I just found it, thank you.
You know what the state requirement is it 50 or 60?
Well, I'd have to go back and
Sure.
look, because they have different standards for
Well,
private driveways and
right.
public rights of way. But
Yes.
A lot of local governments will say, use DOT standard, but I'm not sure what it is in this case.
Okay, let me read the whole statement. Easements for residential increasing from 25 feet in the current ordinance to 50 feet in the new ordinance. This is excessive when you only need 12 foot for a driveway.
And if I
Does that
can,
help?
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Paul.
Does that help?
I was gonna say, I've got the ordinance language,
Okay.
I can read that for you
Okay,
if you
okay.
want. So it says, this is 5.1.4A, it says if access is provided with direct driveway connection to a public or private road, no access easement is required. where access is required across another property ownership to achieve connection to a private or public road. For lots located within subdivisions within 3 lots or more, a 50-foot wide access easement shall be recorded across those lots, and a minimum of 15-foot wide driveway constructed within that 50-foot wide access easement. Access shall be maintained in a condition passable, and then it goes on, but that's the 50-foot requirement. So the actual paved road portion, they're saying if it's a driveway, it only has to be 15 feet, but they want an easement that's wider than that.
And that's when you're crossing a property to get to a public roadway. So if your access to your property requires an easement over another property to get to a public roadway, then it's requiring a 50-foot easement. I don't have the direct
Now,
correlation right
that
now
does
to
make a
what's
lot more sense.
in our current ordinance. I don't know if any of the builders in the audience who have experience with that have any comments,
I just thought it
real estate agents.
needed addressing, so
Okay.
I brought it up
I think it's
for
good.
clarity,
Yeah.
for everybody.
The banks they usually require, if you cross somebody else's property, the bank is gonna kind of require you with a 50
Yes,
minimum foot.
yeah, right.
That's kind of along the lines I'm thinking. I couldn't remember if 50 or 60 feet was the thing, but if we could have clarity on that, it'd be good.
The why behind the 50 feet is what
Mhm.
you're asking, an explanation
Mhm.
for why. Okay.
Okay. You enjoyed all you can stand with us?
I'm done.
Now you know what planning and zoning has gone through for a year and a half. What did you go through? Anything else? Seems- Nothing? Okay, I think our attorney wanted to say something about
Well,
our next meeting.
2 things. I do want to say that, but I believe we need some guidance about what the board wants done next with the UDO. Would you like us to put together a memo with some recommended changes and answers to questions, and then send it straight back to the planning board?
Yes,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
kind of,
And as far as the timing of that goes, is that something that you would like for the planning board to go ahead and get on their agenda for their December meeting, or wait until we have a planning director in place to help
I think
facilitate
they're
and
gonna
be a
need
part
some-
of that
They're probably gonna need some
conversation?
guidance from the new planning
Right.
director, so, I mean, I would say add it when their new planning director's been hired.
Mhm.
so and that's fine, that's good. Kind of an update briefly over where you stand with that position.
Sure, we're
Repost
currently,
it?
yeah, we extended the recruitment process,
Okay.
so everyone who had applied previously is still under consideration. And we've extended it since there had been a month or so since the position had previously closed, to see if there are other people who are interested in it now.
What's the date?
The 17th is the date that it closes, that's Sunday.
Okay,
And then, there would be, I need to look at the applicants, but the interview process will either take place just before Thanksgiving or right after Thanksgiving. So we're getting into a tricky scheduling time in terms of the holidays coming up. But we will be moving forward on that as quickly as possible.
yeah, I think so. It's
And
good.
thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir.
And my update is, we didn't want to do it this way, but there are not many civil superior court sessions in Person County. And so, in the Clayton versus Person County zoning case, that's been going on for some time, there's a motion to dismiss that we've filed. It's going to be heard next Monday. Calendar call starts at 10 o'clock. We don't know when the judge will actually hear us, otherwise we'd give you a specific time. Because of that, I'm gonna be there with my law partner, Kevin Hornick, arguing that, and my law partner, Brady Herman, will be here. So we will update you as soon as we have information about the outcome of that hearing.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, no other business? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion on the floor to adjourn. Any discussion or comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carried.